Welcome, everyone. Let's dive right into today's explainer. Today, we're taking a really close look at something I know so many of us struggle with, and that is organizing our thoughts when we speak. We're going to break down how to talk about complex, everyday things like hobbies, stress relief, and mental health using the AREC method. This is a simple framework of answer, reason, example, and conclusion. And the best part? We're going to do it using incredibly easy and simple vocabulary. You really don't need huge, complicated words to sound fluent. You just need the right structure. So, here is our roadmap for today. First, speaking naturally. Second, the AREC formula. Third, hobbies and stress relief. Fourth, balancing body and mind. And finally, some everyday expressions. Let's get right to it.
All right, section 1, speaking English naturally, and the real problem with unstructured thoughts.
You know the feeling, right? When you're free talking, it is incredibly easy to just get completely lost. You'll have this fantastic idea in your head, but the moment you start speaking, the sentences get way too long and the grammar just falls apart. Take a look at this quote. This is a really common before example from an actual conversation class. The speaker here is trying to say something genuinely profound about how hobbies build our confidence. But because they tried to say the whole shebang in one massive breath, the grammatical structure collapses, and that brilliant idea just gets buried. And honestly, it's not just run-on sentences that trip us up. It's how easily we drift off topic. In one class session, a super simple question about a hobby, listening to music, accidentally wandered through literally all of these topics. The speaker went from music to reducing YouTube time, to a car battery dying, to taking the subway, to gas prices, and finally, somehow, back to stress management. I mean, it's a great display of vocabulary for sure, but the speaker completely lost their main point. So how do we fix this? That brings us to section 2, the AREC speaking formula. This is going to be your anchor for stable and logical English. Okay, so how do we keep our brilliant ideas from turning into a chaotic traffic jam? We absolutely need a framework, and this elegantly illustrates that exact framework, the AREC method. Answer, reason, example, conclusion. This four-step rhythm is literally the secret sauce for answering complex questions with total confidence. You just give a short answer, follow it up with a simple reason, bring it to life with a specific example, and then tie a neat little bow on it with a conclusion. Let's see this in action. Section 3, Hobbies and Stress Relief. We'll apply this formula to everyday topics. We're going to take this AREC formula and use really easy, beginner-friendly vocabulary to build a response. Imagine someone asks you this: how do hobbies help people manage stress in their daily lives? Think for a second about how you'd answer that. Would you try to cram it all into one run-on sentence? Or would you break it down?
Look at how beautifully clean and logical this response is when we stick to the formula. Answer: hobbies help people take a break from stress. Reason: when I do a hobby, I can forget my worries for a short time. Example: for example, listening to music makes me feel calm. Conclusion: I think hobbies are a good way to manage stress every day. Notice how the vocabulary is incredibly simple. Chopped into 4 short sentences like this, it sounds infinitely more natural than one big, complicated thought.
Now, what's really interesting here is how easily we can fix sentences that are just trying to do too much heavy lifting. Look at the original text. The speaker is trying to talk about digital addiction, saying, "My smartphone checks my application lifetime per weekly report." It's pretty clunky, right? But in the better version, we just slice it into 2 simple ideas. My smartphone shows me my weekly screen time report. This is a warning sign. Boom. Immediate clarity. Short sentences are absolutely your best friend.
Moving right along to section 4, balancing body and mind, where we'll tackle deeper comparisons cleanly.
You know, this structure holds up perfectly even when you're discussing deeper comparative subjects like physical versus mental health. Here's our new prompt. Do you think hobbies are as important as exercise or diet for mental health? As you read this, I want you to actively think about your AREC. What's your direct answer? What is the reason? What specific example can you use? And how are you going to conclude it? Let's walk through this together. Answer: yes, I think hobbies are also important for mental health. Reason: exercise is good for the body, but hobbies help people feel happy. Example: playing table tennis with my wife helped me focus on the present moment and forget negative thoughts. Conclusion: physical and mental health should be balanced. Do you see how that personal anecdote about table tennis makes the example step incredibly strong? It totally grounds the whole argument in reality. And there's a fantastic piece of nuance from our source material regarding this. Take a look at the phrase cope with anxiety. When you're talking about mental health, you really don't need complex medical jargon. Saying hobbies help you cope rather than trying to say they cure you is highly natural, accurate English. And recognizing that they are not a complete treatment on their own shows this wonderful depth of thought, all expressed through beautifully simple words.
All right, let's head into our final stretch. Section 5, Essential Everyday English Expressions. Let's do some quick grammar fixes and boost that vocabulary.
Let's stock up your conversational tool belt with some rapid-fire grammar fixes. First up, a classic structural mistake. It is so common to hear, "I like to listening music." But here's the thing, you have to pick a lane. You can use the gerund and say, "I like listening to music," or you can use the infinitive and say, "I like to listen to music." Both are perfectly fine, but you literally cannot mix them together. Just pick one and say it with confidence.
Next, let's talk about translation traps. If you translate straight from your native language in your head, you might end up saying something like, "My car needs to drive once." But, well, cars don't drive themselves, do they? In English, we use the passive voice here because the action is happening to the car. So the natural equivalent is, "My car needs to be driven at least once a week."
Now, pay close attention to this one because time expressions come up constantly in everyday conversation. Trying to squish your method of travel and the time it took into one messy sentence like, "I used the subway to get there, took," is just confusing. Instead, you absolutely must memorize this golden pattern. It took me, say it with me, it took me 1 hour and 40 minutes to get there by subway. It's clean, it's standard, and it works every single time.
To finish stocking up your tool belt, here are 5 incredibly useful, beginner-friendly sentences you should honestly just memorize. I'm doing well, thank you. How about you? The absolute perfect natural greeting. I'm trying to reduce my screen time, a highly relevant modern topic. It is a simple way for me to relax and clear my mind. Such a great way to describe almost any hobby. I'm not familiar with recent music, a really polite way to pivot a conversation. And I think physical and mental health should be balanced, a fantastic concluding sentence. I highly encourage you to practice saying these out loud to build up that muscle memory. And that brings us to the end of today's explainer. But I want to leave you with a rather provocative thought straight from our source material that perfectly bridges the topics of hobbies and mental health. When do you know that your hobby has become your addiction? It's a fascinating question, isn't it? If a hobby stops making you productive and starts basically taking over your life, that line gets pretty blurry. I challenge you to think about what your answer to this question would be. And when you do, remember our secret weapon. Don't use one giant sentence. Just use easy and simple vocabulary with your answer, reason, example, and conclusion. Thank you so much for hanging out and learning with me today, and I'll see you next time.